Welcome to Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority, the lively and engaging podcast for business professionals who've always believed they have a book in them. I'm your host, Diane Windingland. Join me as I chat with authors and industry experts from all around the world to explore simple strategies to write, publish, and leverage your business book. Whether you're an entrepreneur, executive, or an employee, this podcast is for you. Hello and welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Easy Peasy Books podcast. And I have a repeat guest today. However, she hasn't been on this podcast. She's been on my previous podcast, and I have been following for years. I've read, I think, pretty much every book that she's put out. She's just fantastic and incredible mentor for me in terms of communication and how to do that right. So I have Diane Windingland in the house today. So Diane, before we get stuck in, can you just tell people who you are and what you do, and then we'll get talking?
Well, glad to be here, Jillian. I coach and train subject matter experts to speak with confidence and clarity in their communications, typically oral, which would be presentations, interviews, high stakes meetings or conversations, that kind of thing. I have written probably about 13 books on communication, all self-published on Amazon. I do occasionally work with clients who either have written a book or who are thinking about writing a book, who would like their oral communication to have the clarity and finesse that their written communication does. I live in the Houston area, moved here about 2 years ago from Minneapolis, St. Paul. And let's see, what else? I'm a Toastmaster of 22 years. I know you also were in Toastmasters as well. So that's a little bit about me.
Wonderful, wonderful. So I have to start off with when I always like to go and, make sure I do my research on people. And I was surprised to see that you were now in the Texas area, because I went, I'm sure she was in Minneapolis or Minnesota. I knew you were in that area. And I was just like, oh, you're just down the road from me now, which is kind of funny. We're getting closer and closer. You've come down and I've come across. So we're getting closer. So we actually could meet one day, Diane. That would be nice.
Right. You were in Las Vegas before.
I was in Las Vegas. Yeah. So I was there I just got out here full time last spring. So I'm new and enjoying the incredible Texas weather in the winter. So that's just brilliant. So one of the things that I needed a reminder of was your career path. And I always love to go and look at people's LinkedIn profiles, because that's a wonderful thing that we should all be using to promote ourselves, promote our books, etc. And I was like, oh, wow, I had forgotten your background of working with cruise missiles and being an engineer. And it was just like, I had forgotten that part of your background. So Diane, tell us really quickly, how do we go from the precision of, testing and designing cruise missiles to the precision of communications coaching? Because I kind of see they're like mirror images, but wow, talk about your pivot.
Well, the pivot occurred for a few reasons. One was I was only an engineer for 3 or 4 years, and then I became a stay-at-home mom. And I was homeschooling my kids, and my oldest son was 14 at the time, and I thought he really should have some public speaking experience, but talking to just me and his sister, that wasn't going to cut it. So we visited a Toastmasters club, and I asked if he could join. They said, no, you have to be 18, but we will let him give a few speeches on one condition. And the condition was that I joined the club. So that is how I started getting interested in public speaking. And from there, I was in a few contests. I was in some leadership. People started asking me for help with their speeches. And then about 2012, I decided, maybe I could make this a business. And I don't know how I was so smart when I picked the name of my business in 2012, Virtual Speech Coach, because I was doing absolutely nothing virtually. I just thought, well, maybe someday I could have a business where I could work with people all around the world through my computer. And that didn't really come to fruition until the pandemic. And then it came in a big way. And that's the short story of how I went from being an engineer to being a stay-at-home mom, to being a Toastmaster, to being a coach.
I love it. I love it. And I just have to tell everybody, if you don't understand what Toastmasters is, it's about communication and leadership. And Diane has excelled. She is a DTM, which is a distinguished Toastmaster, something I have never achieved myself. So I'm quite in awe because it really is like having a PhD in communications. So, I got through the first couple levels. So it's like I got a bachelor's degree, but you've got the PhD. And it's something because it not only attests to your communication skills, but also your leadership skills, because there's so much mentoring that has to go on. And then couple that with you've now written 13 books. So we'll now go into the book stage. And your books are primarily about communications, where you have done everything from helping young people, homeschoolers, young people with speech, because you're never too young. And I attest to that myself, because I also helped my children who are now adults with their communications skills. And public speaking is an important thing, never too early for that. But you help them sort of all the way up to, in our careers, et cetera, et cetera. So you've written 13 books now, lucky 13, baker's dozen. And this new one is called The Clarity Code. Do you have that? Can you just hold it up for anybody who's watching? The Clarity Code. I love it. I love it. And what's the subtitle? How to communicate complex
ideas with simplicity and power.
I love that. I love that, because it's really about being strategic, and it all comes down to clarity. So you have done a lot of books like Impromptu Speaking and Cat Got Your Tongue, how to do these things, being nervous about public speaking. But this is I'm thinking, one of the most strategic books you've done. It's very professional. It's very targeted. Can you kind of tell us about who this book is for and what problem it solves?
Well, it's tempting to say it's for everyone, but I won't say that. I did have many people on my launch team who were of varied backgrounds, but I really wrote this for the subject matter expert, particularly people who may be in technical fields where they are challenged to communicate their complex ideas in a way that connects with different audiences. When they're talking with executives, this was me as an engineer. My boss had asked me a question, and I thought it was a good idea to build up to my point, because you can't refute it if I'm giving you all the evidence before I make the point. Until one day he said, "Would you just get to the point?" He was very frustrated. Now, with my own peers, I could be that detailed. And if I was talking to someone who didn't have the technical background, I would need to adjust as well. So that was the audience I had in mind. However, people in non-technical fields would also find it very useful for clarifying their own thoughts, thinking about their audience, using tools like simplifying, like even using AI for testing and simplifying and developing your message.
I love that. I love that. And I think clarity is the heart of everything, because I think what happens, especially if we're talking about people that want to write a book, we have all this expertise. And especially if you're in that sort of 50 and up range, you've been doing stuff all your life. You have so many great things to bring to the table. And I've worked with authors who just I almost know too much. It's that curse of knowledge. And there's that temptation of well, let me just brain dump every single thing that I know, and I'll put it all in one book, which is now this thick. And nobody wants that. We don't want to read that. We don't want to read that.
That's probably the biggest mistake, where there's the pull toward wanting to put everything in. And if you try to make everything important, nothing is important. And there's no angle for the book to be a hook. Like, ooh, that's interesting. So yeah, that's probably the biggest thing I see. That and trying to remember what it was like to not know everything you know.
Yes, it's like you have to step back, and also too, we know too much jargon, and we have to almost say, kind of make this simpler for me. I'm always about easy peasy of taking something and distilling it down to the easiest, but you don't want to dumb it down. It's like you want to clarify it and make it simple. So I guess that's really where sometimes we can use some help with a little help from our AI friends of like, okay, how can I take this what I'm doing and give me that sort of zoomed back version of what people should see it as.
Yeah, I have a chapter on using AI to clarify and test your message. And AI doesn't replace what you're doing. It can help. I think of AI at this point as an assistant, my very smart, very patient, usually too kind assistant. And it can give me fresh eyes on a topic. I could say, and I've done this where I had a client and I went to their website. I had no idea what they were doing after I looked at their website, and I just copied the about. I said to ChatGPT, explain what this person does in terms that a high schooler would understand. And it's like, oh, okay, now I get it. And so it made me think, well, sometimes it could work the other way, where I have this assumed knowledge, the curse of knowledge, that I don't even realize I don't know what they don't know. I haven't been in their shoes for a while. So AI can give me fresh eyes.
I love that. I love that. And even going back to when you were talking about your boss who said, get to the point, that having that idea of how it's not just about what you want to tell, it's what do they need to hear and what do they already know? Because I think sometimes we can say, well, yeah, you're aware of this, but maybe you didn't see this angle. So I think maybe what you're saying is sometimes you have to balance your message with clarifying your message, but also clarifying the audience for that message too.
What I heard you say is that we need to clarify not only our message, but our message for a particular audience. And yes, you need to tailor your message so that it will hit the audience where they're at in terms of their level of knowledge, their level of what's in it for me. Because if I'm talking to a peer versus talking to an executive versus talking to a customer or client, they all have different levels of desire for why they might be interested in my topic, and also different levels of knowledge. So you have to tailor for the audience.
I love that. I love that. So one thing that you talk about in the book is you talk about using things like analogies. And I just want to read one during the podcast because I just thought it was this was so perfect. So in one page you say, without clarity, your message is like a foggy windshield. You may be headed in the right direction, but no one feels safe moving forward. And I thought that was just like, I could envision that. I could be in that car, and we all know what that's like. So
It's a terrible feeling.
like if you've ever been, especially in the Houston area, you have so much humidity, and just that feeling of when you're driving and you're just like, oh my gosh, you're using every paper towel in the car to try and get that. And the windshield, it can't get clean. It's like you got it on defrost. Does it need heat? Does it need cold? What does it need to do? And you're right. You're just like, how do I continue to move forward when I can't see? So that is a great example of using analogies and metaphors. What are some other ways that we can get clarity?
Well, you can simplify your message. And in the book, there's several ways you can do that, from trimming out words. Like if you can delete 20% of your words and make it less wordy, you can prioritize your message. I even think of Emails are the prime example for people who still read emails, is that I hate reading emails where I feel like, man, I got to go get a cup of coffee. This is so long and I don't want to read it. Just having the important stuff up front. So even my husband and I, he prefers emails to text. So annoying. But I know he won't read my emails. So it's a catch-22 situation there. What I do is I just put the important part right in the subject line, action needed, ... and then I'll write EOM, end of message. So he doesn't even have to open the email because I don't write anything in it. But know your audience. In that case, I wasted a lot of time writing emails to him until I thought, he doesn't even read them. It was like voicemail. He doesn't listen to voicemail. So why leave a voicemail? Yeah. Then you can chunk your information into smaller pieces so people can digest something in a smaller piece than a larger piece. There's lots of things that I can't even remember what I wrote in my own book. Isn't that a problem? When you forget what you write in your own book, it's like, I wrote it a while ago.
I know. That's always hard. And sometimes, it's like you almost go back and reread it and you're like very impressed with yourself.
It was a chapter on simplifying. Let's see. There was this chapter on structure. There's a chapter on illustrating with examples, stories, and analogies, simplifying without dumbing down. That's the chapter. And just to list the techniques that I have there: prioritizing, trimming, chunking, layering, presenting things in a logical sequence that builds, paraphrasing, reinforcing. So those are the tools that I talk about in that chapter on simplifying without dumbing down.
I love that. And I think that's something every writer needs. And to really make sure, because I think so many times we sit down to write a book and like you said, there's just so much information. So it's really wading through it and figuring out. And was that difficult? Was it difficult to write a book about clarity? Because you're having to walk the talk, so to speak, of I'm sure you started and it was just like, oh my gosh, there's so much I could talk about, but I have to have clarity in my own message for this book. So Is there a lot where was it in the editing stage? Did you find you had to rip out?
It was sometimes ironic. So I worked with the concept of a launch team. Is that something you're familiar with?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just a shout out. I got the idea from Launch Your Book by Robbie Samuels. You may have heard of Robbie. Anyway, so I had sent out a few chapters to my launch team, not a big launch team, like 30 people. And in one chapter, I had used the acronym TLDR, too long didn't read. And I had 2 people specifically say, I have no idea what that means. And I thought, in fact, I even used that as an example in the book. I said, I probably should take this out or provide an explanation because it's not clear if people don't understand it.
That's brilliant. And it's a good way of saying that you do need that feedback, because sometimes we're in a little bit of a bubble and we think we got everything. And we think, well, if they don't understand it, that's their problem. But it means we need to kind of go back and rework that a little bit. And sometimes it's very humbling because you think, isn't it clear? But it's not always clear. And we don't even recognize sometimes. So having that feedback up front, I think that's brilliant. So
I made use of ChatGPT from the initial stages of the book. So back in May of 2025, I thought I had just finished rewriting a book, Speech Class for Teens Revise. I thought, well, now I'd like to write a grown-up book. So I think I have all these books. I don't want to repeat content that much. So I did brainstorming with ChatGPT. I had put in all my book titles and I said, what's another book topic that I could write about in the area of communication that I haven't already written about that would probably do well on Amazon. And so ChatGPT came up with some ideas. And actually, I didn't pick any of the ideas that ChatGPT came up with, but one had triggered in my mind the idea of clarity. And then I did some more brainstorming on that topic with ChatGPT. And then as I was writing it, I had ChatGPT act as my editor before I actually sent the book to an editor to ask for clarification. Like I even said, now, since my book is about clarity, I have to be clear. Is there anything that's not clear to the average reader? And so I use ChatGPT for that as well. And there's many different AI things that people can use. I was just familiar with ChatGPT. It knows so much about me that I didn't have to start fresh with another AI.
I love that. I love that. So this is your 13th book. You are, can we talk a little bit about your publishing journey? Because you have done, I'm assuming you're still self-published all the way through, although I noticed that you now have audiobooks as one of the formats. And so that was new. I didn't notice that before. And you have to be in the beta program of Amazon. I don't have that yet. So not all of us have that.
My first audiobook, I actually paid a talent on Fiverr, and it was 100 tips and tricks to appear confident in presentations. I paid somebody on Fiverr to create the audio files for me. I thought about doing it myself, but I couldn't pass the Audible sound test. I had too much echo, a little too much noise in my house. I'm like, you know what? I'm not going to putz with it. So it wasn't that much money. It was like $300 or something to hire somebody to do it. So I did it for that book. The other books that have the Audible are with AI voice. And they give you, I don't know, maybe 40 different voices to pick from. I'm not even sure. There are a lot of voices. And I just listened to some voices and picked the one that I thought fit best. And, it may not be as great as having a real person, but it didn't cost me any extra. And I thought, why not?
Yeah. In my opinion, first of all, I thought it was very good. And also too, you can actually listen to a sample so you can see, is that a voice that would resonate for me? Because there are, I've read books or listened to books and I didn't like the author's voice. And it was just like, okay, some voices are not good, but I found that to be a pleasant voice to listen to. And I think that the more formats we can offer, we're catering to different people's learning styles. And for an auditory listener, for an auditory learner, if they want to consume a book at the gym or in a car or that sort of thing, it's like, why not offer that option? Because it's just kind of like ebooks are not for everyone. I love ebooks, but I also like hard copies too. So having all those multiple formats, I think, is great. So I think that's actually a cool thing. And I love that you've pretty much you've done it now for all your books.
Most of them, not all. Most of them I've done it for.
Okay, I love that. I love that. So that's good. So you're still self-published. You are not with a traditional publisher yet. Any regrets? Like, if we got anybody here who's like thinking about writing a book, what's your opinion about self-publishing?
Well, first of all, I have not tried to work with a traditional publisher or even with what I would call, used to be called a vanity publisher. I don't know what they're called now. People who help or groups who help people publish their books. I mean, you provide services, which is a little bit different. People can pick and choose what services they want from you. What I like about self-publishing is it gives me pretty much complete control, and I maintain that control. And, the royalties come into my account every month, which is always not that much money. I would starve if I had to live off what I made. It's like $200-$300 a month on average. It's just a little bit of money. But because most of my book publishing costs have been so low, ranging from $0, I have published for $0, up to this book was my most expensive book, The Clarity Code. That was about $1,700. And it doesn't really even have any illustrations. A previous book, 100 Tips and Tricks, I had 103 illustrations. Paid somebody at Fiverr from Pakistan, I think, about $800 to do those illustrations. But that didn't even cost as much. The person who I had edit the previous book, and his prices went way up. So editing was like about $800, was like, well, and I didn't think it needed that much editing, but I figured I really want this book to be professional, so I'm going to do that. You have control, and I like that. I like that I don't have to work with a publisher, meet any demands of anybody else. I can do it on my own schedule. And there are downsides, of course, and that's where people like you come in with your services. If I have always done everything myself, except I've hired out pieces to Fiverr. There were many books where I did not hire anything out because it was like, okay, this is just a little easy book. Like I made some short little workbooks, like here's speech 0 to hero in 1 hour. It's just a workbook. I did not need to hire an editor or someone to do the cover. I just did it all myself. But there are things to learn. I will let you know, for my very first book, which was Small Talk, Big Results, I knew nothing about self-publishing. And I published that just by Googling questions and finding answers. And that went from hearing someone tell me I should write a book, whom I respected, who said it would be the best business card ever. And it was July 31st, 2010 that he said that. I still remember the conversation. Then by October, I had a book in my hands. And I had used content that I had mostly previously written in blogs. So I only had to work a little bit on the content. But I have found that I didn't need to know a lot. I mean, I probably made some mistakes. I remember my first speech class routines book. I could not figure out how to get the page numbers to show up on left and right hand pages differently, because they have to be on right. Unless you have them right in the middle, that is a solution. Just have all the page numbers in the middle. And so there were things like that got published because I didn't know how to do it. And I didn't want to pay somebody to do it because I had no money at the time. But if you're willing, you can learn it. You can hire people to do parts of it. After publishing my first book, I got a book from the library on self-publishing. It was about 2 inches thick. And I started paging through it. And I remember thinking, I am so glad that I did not read this book, because I probably would have freaked myself out and not tried to self-publish. So it's very doable. I think it's gotten easier. The actual publishing part, I think, is by far the easiest part. The whole uploading to Amazon, getting your account set up, I think that's super easy. That, there are things to learn, but it's pretty easy. The book marketing and the book writing piece, those are a little trickier. And I would say most people, if they're self-publishing, before you even write the book, if you haven't started writing it, think about how you're going to market it. What is your approach going to be? And I would caution you against spending too much money on getting your book into the world, because odds are very high that you're not going to make a lot of money. It may, in terms of the book sale itself. Now, it could also get you speaking engagements. It could get you clients. So there's that back end money on top of any royalties you may get. But the best thing about self-publishing is you are in the driver's seat. You don't have to try to, push your manuscript onto publishers who will probably reject it. You can just do it. That's odds.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant. And as a communication coach, would you say that having a book can help you with speaking engagements? Is that a good fit for speakers to have that book?
Certainly, because authors are seen as credible experts. You have a voice of authority when you have a book.
Brilliant, brilliant. So we're getting near the end of our time together. So I just want to kind of go back to the clarity code one last time, Diane. And I just want to say, if somebody was listening today and they were like, okay, I'm that expert, I'm raising my hand, I want to write that book, and 2026, a new year is beginning as the new year unfolds. What's the first step? Like, what's one actionable step that person could do if they have all this expertise, they want to turn it into the book? What's that first clarity actionable step?
Pick a direction, pick a topic. You probably need to brainstorm a few and then just go with it. And you could test it out with some friends or your target market to see which topic resonates. I did that with titles. I tried out some titles and ended up on the title that I selected. But you can do that with topics too. Pick a direction.
I love that. I love that. Well, thank you so much for being here today, Diane. People can connect with you through LinkedIn. We'll be sure to put that in the show notes. And what is your website? Can you just tell us your website so we have that as well?
It's virtualspeechcoach.com.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you for being here today. Thank you to everybody who tuned in, and we will see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to this edition of Easy Peasy Books, From Author to Authority. If you found value in today's episode, I'd be grateful if you could leave us a review. It helps other aspiring authors discover our podcast. To learn more about writing, publishing, and leveraging your business book, visit my website at easypeasybooks.com.